Norwegian Wood, Disc 10.
As soon as I got home from work, I sat at my new desk and wrote to Midori. I told her how I felt, as honestly as I could. I apologized, without explanations or excuses, for having been so careless and insensitive. I miss you, I wrote. I want to see you as soon as possible. I want you to see my new house. Please write to me, I said, and sent the letter special delivery. The answer never came. This was the beginning of one weird spring. I spent my whole break waiting for letters. I couldn't take a trip. I couldn't go home to see my parents. I couldn't even take a part-time job because there was no telling when a letter might arrive from Naoko saying she wanted me to come see her on such and such a date. Afternoons I would spend in the nearby shopping district in Kichijoji, watching double features or reading in a jazz coffee house. I saw no one and talked to almost no one. And once a week I would write to Naoko. I never suggested to her that I was hoping for an answer. I didn't want to pressure her in any way. I would tell her about my painting work, about Siegel, about the peach blossoms in the garden, about the nice old lady who sold tofu, about the nasty old lady in the local eatery, about the meals I was making for myself. But still, she never wrote. Whenever I got sick of reading or listening to records, I would do a little work in the garden. From my landlord, I borrowed a rake and broom and pruning shears, and spent time pulling weeds and trimming bushes. It didn't take much to make the yard look good. Once the owner invited me to join him for a cup of tea. So we sat on the veranda of the main house, drinking green tea and munching on rice crackers, and sharing small talk. After retirement, he had taken a job with an insurance company, he said. But he had left that too after a couple of years. And now he was taking it easy. The house and land had been in the family for a long time. His children were grown and independent, and he could manage a comfortable old age without working. Which is why he and his wife were always traveling together. That's nice, I said. No, it's not, he answered. Traveling's no fun. I'd much rather be working. He let the yard grow wild, he said, because there were no decent gardeners in the area, and because he had developed allergies that made it impossible for him to do the work himself. Cutting grass made him sneeze. When we had finished our tea, he showed me a storage shed and told me I could use anything I found inside, more or less by way of thanks for my gardening. We don't have any use for any of this stuff, he said, so feel free. The place was crammed with all kinds of stuff. An old wooden bathtub, a kid's swimming pool, baseball bats. I found an old bike, a handy-sized dining table with 2 chairs, a mirror, and a guitar. I'd like to borrow these if you don't mind, I said. Feel free, he said again. I spent a day working on the bike, cleaning the rust off, oiling the bearings, pumping up the tires, adjusting the gears, and taking it to a bike repair shop to have a new gear cable installed. It looked like a different bike by the time I was finished. I cleaned a thick layer of dust off the table and gave the piece a new coat of varnish. I replaced the strings of the guitar and glued a section of the body that was coming apart. I took a wire brush to the rust on the tuning pegs and adjusted those. It wasn't much of a guitar, but at least I got it to stay in tune. I hadn't had a guitar in my hands since high school, I realized. I sat on the porch and picked my way through the drifters up on the roof as well as I could. I was amazed to find I still remembered most of the chords. Next, I took a few scraps of lumber and made myself a mailbox. I painted it red, wrote my name on it, and set it out in front of my door. Up until April 3rd, the only piece of mail that found its way to my box was something that had been forwarded from the dorm. A notice from the reunion committee of my high school class. A class reunion was the last thing I wanted to have anything to do with. That was the class I had been in with Kizuki. I threw the thing into the trash. I found a letter in the box on the afternoon of April 4th. Reiko Ishida, it said on the back. I made a nice clean cut across the seal with my scissors and went out to the porch to read it. I had a feeling this was not going to be good news, and I was right. First, Reiko apologized for making me wait so long for an answer. Naoko had been struggling to write me a letter, she said, but she could never seem to write one through to the end. I offered to send you an answer in her place, but every time I pointed out how wrong it was of her to keep you waiting, she insisted that it was far too personal a matter, that she would write to you herself, which is why I haven't written sooner. I'm sorry, really. I hope you can forgive me. I know you must have had a difficult month waiting for an answer, but believe me, the month has been just as difficult for Naoko. Please try to understand what she's been going through. Her condition is not good, I have to say in all honesty. She was trying her best to stand on her own 2 feet, but so far the results have not been good. The first symptom of her problem was her loss of the ability to write letters. That happened right around the end of November or beginning of December. Then she started hearing things. Whenever she would try to write a letter, she would hear people talking to her, which made it impossible for her to write. The voices would interfere with her attempts to choose her words. It wasn't all that bad until about the time of your second visit, so I didn't take it too seriously. For all of us here, these kinds of symptoms come in cycles, more or less. In her case, they got quite serious after you left. She is having trouble now just holding an ordinary conversation. She can't find the right words to speak, and that puts her into a terribly confused state. Confused and frightened. Meanwhile, the things she's hearing are getting worse. We have a session every day with one of the specialists. Naoko and the doctor and I sit around talking and trying to find the exact part of her that's broken. I came up with the idea that it would be good to add you to one of our sessions if possible, and the doctor was in favor of it, but Naoko was against it. I can tell you exactly what her reason was. I want my body to be clean of all this when I meet him. That was not the problem, I said to her. The problem was to get her well as quickly as possible, and I pushed as hard as I could, but she wouldn't change her mind. I think I once explained to you that this is not a specialized hospital. We do have medical specialists here, of course, and they provide effective treatments. But concentrated therapy is another matter. The point of this facility is to create an effective environment in which the patient can treat herself or himself, and that does not, properly speaking, include medical treatment. Which means that if Naoko's condition grows any worse, they will probably have to transfer her to some other hospital or medical facility or what have you. Personally, I would find this very painful, but we would have to do it. This is not to say that she could not come back here for treatment on a kind of temporary furlough. Or better yet, she could even be cured and finish up with hospitals completely. In any case, we're doing everything we can, and Naoko is doing everything she can. The best thing you can do, meanwhile, is hope for her recovery and keep sending those letters to her. The letter was dated March 31st. After I had finished reading it, I stayed on the porch and let my eyes wander out to the garden, full now with the freshness of spring. An old cherry tree stood there, its blossoms nearing the height of their glory. A soft breeze blew, and the light of day lent its strangely blurred, smoky colors to everything. Seagull wandered over from somewhere, and after scratching at the boards of the veranda for a while, she stretched out next to me and went to sleep. Some serious thinking, but I had no idea how to go about it. And to tell the truth, thinking was the last thing I wanted to do. The time would come soon enough when I had no choice in the matter, and when that time came, I would take a good long time to think things over. Not now, though. Not now. I spent the day watching the garden, propped against a pillar and stroking Seagull. I felt completely drained. The afternoon deepened, twilight approached, and bluish shadows enveloped the garden. Siegel disappeared, but I went on staring at the cherry blossoms. In the spring gloom, they looked like flesh that had burst through the skin over festering wounds. The garden filled up with a sweet, heavy stench of rotting flesh. And that's when I thought of Naoko's flesh. Naoko's beautiful flesh lay before me in the darkness. Countless buds bursting through her skin, green and trembling in an almost imperceptible breeze. Why did such a beautiful body have to be so sick, I wondered. Why didn't they just leave Naoko alone? I went inside and closed my curtains. But even indoors, there was no escape from the smell of spring. It filled everything from the ground up. But the only thing the smell brought to mind for me now was that putrefying stench. Shut in behind my curtains, I felt a violent loathing for spring. I hated what the spring had in store for me. I hated the dull, throbbing ache it aroused inside me. I had never hated anything in my life with such intensity. I spent 3 straight days after that all but walking on the bottom of the sea. I could hardly hear what people said to me, and they had just as much trouble catching anything I had to say. My whole body felt enveloped in some kind of membrane, cutting off any direct contact between me and the outside world. I couldn't touch them, and they couldn't touch me. I was utterly helpless, and as long as I remained in that state, they were unable to reach out to me. I sat leaning against the wall, staring up at the ceiling. When I felt hungry, I would nibble anything within reach, take a drink of water, and when the sadness of it got to me, I'd knock myself out with whiskey. I didn't bathe. I didn't shave. This is how the 3 days went by. A letter came from Midori on April 6th. She invited me to meet her on campus and have lunch on the 10th, when we had to register for classes. I put off writing to you as long as I could, which makes us even. So let's make up. I have to admit it, I miss you. I read the letter again and again, 4 times altogether. And still I couldn't tell what she was trying to say to me. What could it possibly mean? My brain was so fogged over I couldn't find the connection from one sentence to the next. How would meeting her on registration day make us even? Why did she want to have lunch with me? I was really losing it. My mind had gone slack, like the soggy roots of a subterranean plant. But somehow I knew I had to snap out of it. And then those words of Nagasawa's came to mind. Don't feel sorry for yourself. Only assholes do that. Right on. I heard myself thinking. I let out a sigh and got to my feet. I did my laundry for the first time in weeks. Went to the public bath and shaved, cleaned my place up, shopped for food, and cooked myself a decent meal for a change. Fed the starving seagull, drank only beer, and did 30 minutes of exercise. Shaving, I discovered in the mirror that I was becoming emaciated. My eyes were popping. I could hardly recognize myself. I went out the next morning on a longish bike ride, and after finishing lunch at home, I read Reiko's letter one more time. Then I did some serious thinking about what I ought to do next. The main reason I had taken Reiko's letter so hard was that it had upset my optimistic belief that Naoko was getting better. Naoko herself had told me, "My sickness is a lot worse than you think. It has far deeper roots." And Reiko had warned me there was no telling what might happen. Still, I had seen Naoko twice, and had been given the impression that she was on the mend. I had assumed that the only problem was whether she could regain the courage to return to the real world, and that if she managed to, the two of us could join forces to make a go of it. Reiko's letter smashed the illusory castle that I had built on that fragile hypothesis, leaving only a flattened surface devoid of feeling. I would have to do something to regain my footing. It would probably take a long time for Naoko to recover. And even then, she would probably be more debilitated and would have lost even more of her self-confidence than ever. I would have to adapt myself to this new situation. As strong as I might become, though, it would not solve all the problems. I knew that much. But there was nothing else I could do. Just keep my own spirits up and wait for her to recover. Hey there, Kizuki, I thought. Unlike you, I've chosen to live, and to live the best I know how. Sure, it was hard for you. What the hell, it's hard for me. Really hard. And all because you killed yourself and left Naoko behind. But that's something I will never do. I will never, ever turn my back on her. First of all, because I love her, and because I'm stronger than she is. And I'm just going to keep on getting stronger. I'm going to mature. I'm going to be an adult. Because that's what I have to do. I always used to think I'd like to stay 17 or 18 if I could. But not anymore. I'm not a teenager anymore. I've got a sense of responsibility now. I'm not the same guy I was when we used to hang out together. I'm 20 now. And I have to pay the price to go on living. Shit, Watanabe, what happened to you? Midori asked. You're all skin and bones. That bad, huh? Too much you-know-what with that married girlfriend of yours, I bet? I smiled and shook my head. I haven't slept with the girl since the beginning of October. Phew! That can't be true. We're talking 6 months here. You heard me. So how'd you lose so much weight? By growing up, I said. Midori put her hands on my shoulders and looked me in the eye with a twisted scowl that soon turned into a sweet smile. It's true, she said. Something's different, kinda. You've changed. I told you, I grew up. I'm an adult now. You're fantastic. The way your brain works, she said as if genuinely impressed. Let's go eat. I'm starved. We went to a little restaurant behind the literature department. I ordered the lunch special and she did the same. Hey, Watanabe, are you mad at me? What for? For not answering you, just to get even. Do you think I should have done that? I mean, you apologized and all. Yeah, but it was my fault to begin with. That's just how it goes. My sister says I shouldn't have done it, that it was too unforgiving, too childish. Yeah, but it made you feel better, didn't it? Getting even like that? Uh-huh. Okay then, that's that. You are forgiving, aren't you? Midori said. But tell me the truth, Watanabe. You haven't had sex for 6 months? Not once. So that time you put me to bed, you must have really wanted it bad. Yeah, I guess I did. But you didn't do it, did you? Look, you're the best friend I've got now, I said. I don't want to lose you. You know, if you had tried to force yourself on me that time, I wouldn't have been able to resist. I was so exhausted. But I was too big and hard, I said. Midori smiled and touched my wrist. A little before that, I decided I was going to believe in you. 100%. That's how I managed to sleep like that with total peace of mind. I knew I'd be all right. I'd be safe with you there. And I did sleep like a log, didn't I? You sure did. On the other hand, if you were to say to me, hey, Midori, let's do it, then everything will be great. I'd probably do it with you. Now, don't think I'm trying to seduce you or tease you. I'm just telling you what's on my mind, with total honesty. I know. While we ate lunch, we showed each other our registration cards and found that we had registered for 2 of the same courses. So I'd be seeing her twice a week, at least. With that out of the way, Midori told me about her living arrangements. For a while, neither she nor her sister could get used to apartment life, because it was too easy, she said. They had always been used to running around like crazy every day, taking care of sick people, helping out at the bookstore, and one thing or another, she said.
This is the way we should have been living all along. Not having to worry about anyone else's needs. Just stretching out any way we felt like it.
It made us both nervous at first, like our bodies were floating a couple of inches off the floor. It didn't seem real. Like real life couldn't really be like that. We were both tense, like everything was going to get tipped upside down any minute. A couple of worrywarts, I said with a smile. Well, it's just that life has been too cruel to us till now, Midori said. But that's okay. We're going to get back everything it owes us. I'll bet you are, I said, knowing you. But tell me, what's your sister doing these days? A friend of hers opened this swanky accessory shop a little while ago. My sister goes there to help out 3 times a week. Otherwise, she's studying cooking, going out on dates with her fiancé, going to the movies, vegging out, and just plain enjoying life. Midori then asked about my new life. I gave her a description of the layout of the house and the big yard, and Siegel the cat, and my landlord. Are you enjoying yourself? She asked. Pretty much, I said. Could have fooled me, said Midori. Yeah, and it's springtime too, I said. And you're wearing that cool sweater your girlfriend knitted for you. That was a shocker. I glanced down at my wine-colored sweater. How did you know? You're as honest as they come, said Midori. I'm guessing, of course. Anyhow, what's wrong with you? I don't know. I'm trying to whip up a little enthusiasm. Just remember, life is a box of cookies. I shook my head a few times and looked at her. Maybe it's because I'm not so smart, but sometimes I don't know what the hell you're talking about. You know how they've got these cookie assortments? And you like some, but you don't like others? And you eat up all the ones you like, and the only ones left are the ones you don't like so much. I always think about that when something painful comes up. Now I just have to polish these off, and everything will be okay. Life is a box of cookies. I guess you could call it a philosophy. It's true, though. I've learned it from experience. We were drinking our coffee when 2 girls came in. Midori seemed to know them from school. The 3 of them compared registration cards and talked about a million different things. What kind of grade did you get in German? So-and-so got hurt in the campus riots. Great shoes, where'd you buy them? I half listened, feeling as if their comments were coming from the other side of the world. I sipped my coffee and watched the scene passing by the shop window. It was a typical university springtime scene, as the new year was getting underway. A haze hanging in the sky, the cherries blooming, the new students, you could tell at a glance, carrying armloads of new books. I felt myself drifting off a little and thought about Naoko, unable to return to school again this year. A small glass full of anemones stood by the window. The other 2 went back to their table. Midori and I went out to walk around the neighborhood. We visited a few used bookstores, bought some books, went to another coffee house for another cup, played some pinball at a game center, and sat on a park bench, talking. Or rather, Midori talked, and I grunted in response. When she said she was thirsty, I ran over to a candy store and bought us 2 colas. I came back to find her scribbling away with her ballpoint pen on some lined paper. What's that? I asked. Nothing, she said. At 3:30, she announced, I gotta get going. I'm supposed to meet my sister in the Ginza. We walked to the subway station and went off in different directions. As she left, Midori stuffed the piece of lined paper, now folded in 4, into my pocket. Read this when you get home, she said. I read it on the train. I'm writing this letter to you while you're off buying drinks. This is the first time in my life I've ever written a letter to somebody sitting next to me on a bench, but I feel it's the only way I can get through to you. I mean, you're hardly listening to anything I say. Am I right? Do you realize you did something terrible to me today? You never even noticed that my hairstyle had changed, did you? I've been working on it forever, trying to grow it out. And finally, at the end of last week, I managed to get it into a style you could actually call girlish. But you never even noticed. It was looking pretty good, so I figured I'd give you a little shock when you saw me for the first time after such a long time. But it didn't even register with you. Don't you think that's awful? I'll bet you can't even remember what I was wearing today. Hey, I'm a girl. So what if you got something on your mind? You can spare me one decent look. All you had to say was cute hair, and I would have been able to forgive you for being sunk in a million thoughts. But no. Which is why I'm going to tell you a lie. It's not true that I have to meet my sister in the Ginza. I was planning to spend the night at your place. I even brought my pajamas with me. It's true. I've got my pajamas and a toothbrush in my bag. I must be an idiot. I mean, you never even invited me over to see your new place. Oh, well, what the hell? You obviously want to be alone, so I'll leave you alone. Go ahead and think away to your heart's content. But don't get me wrong. I'm not totally mad at you. I'm just sad. You were so nice to me when I was having my problems. But now that you're having yours, it seems there's not a thing I can do for you. You're all locked up in that little world of yours. And when I try knocking on the door, you just sort of look up for a second and go right back inside. So now I see you coming back with our drinks, walking and thinking. I was hoping you'd trip, but you didn't. Now you're sitting next to me, chugging down your cola. I was holding out one last hope that you'd notice and say, hey, your hair's changed. But no go. If you had, I would have ripped this letter up and said, let's go to your place. I'll make you a nice supper, and afterward we can get in bed and cuddle. But you're about as sensitive as a steel plate. Goodbye. P.S. Please don't talk to me next time we meet in class. I rang Midori's apartment from the station when I got off the train in Kichijoji, but there was no answer. With nothing better to do, I ambled around the neighborhood looking for some part-time work I could take after classes started. I would be free all day Saturday and Sunday, and could work after 5 o'clock on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. But finding a job that fit my particular schedule was no easy matter. I gave up and went home. When I went out to buy groceries for dinner, I tried Midori's place again. Her sister told me that Midori hadn't come home yet, and that she had no idea when she'd be back. I thanked her and hung up. After eating, I tried to write to Midori, but I gave up after several false starts and wrote to Naoko instead. Spring was here, I said, and the new school year was beginning. I told her I missed her, that I had been hoping to be able to meet her and talk. In any case, I said, I've decided to make myself strong. As far as I can tell, that's all I can do. There's one other thing. Maybe it just has to do with me, and you may not care about this one way or the other, but I'm not sleeping with anybody anymore. That's because I don't want to forget the last time you touched me. It meant a lot more to me than you might think. I think about it all the time. I put the letter in an envelope, stuck on a stamp, and sat at my desk a long while staring at it. It was a much shorter letter than usual, but I had the feeling that Naoko might understand me better that way. I poured myself an inch and a half of whiskey, drank it down in 2 swallows, and went to sleep. The next day, I found a job near Kichijoji Station that I could do on Saturdays and Sundays, waiting on tables at a smallish Italian restaurant. The conditions were nothing much, but transportation and lunches were included. And whenever somebody on the late shift took the day off on a Monday, Wednesday, or Thursday, which happened often, I could take their place. This was perfect for me. The manager said they would raise my pay once I had stayed with them for 3 months, and they wanted me to start that Saturday. He was a far more decent guy than the clown who ran the record store in Shinjuku. I tried phoning Midori's apartment again, and again her sister answered. Midori hadn't come back since yesterday, she said, sounding tired. And now she herself was beginning to worry. Did I have any idea where she might have gone? All I knew was that Midori had her pajamas and a toothbrush in her bag. I saw Midori in class on Wednesday. She was wearing a deep green sweater and the dark sunglasses she had often worn that summer. She was seated in the last row, talking with the slightly built girl with glasses I had seen once before. I approached her and said I'd like to talk to her after class. The girl with glasses looked at me first, and then Midori looked at me. Her hairstyle was, in fact, somewhat more womanly than it had been before, more grown up. I have to see somebody, Midori said, cocking her head slightly. I won't take much of your time, I said. 5 minutes. Midori removed her sunglasses and narrowed her eyes. She might just as well have been looking at a crumbling, abandoned house some 100 yards in the distance. I don't want to talk to you. Sorry, she said. The girl with glasses looked at me with eyes that said, she says she doesn't want to talk to you. Sorry. I sat in the seat on the right end of the front row for the lecture, an overview of the works of Tennessee Williams and their place in American literature. And when it was over, I did a long count to 3 and turned around. Midori was gone. April was too lonely a month to spend all alone. In April, everyone around me looked happy. People would throw their coats off and enjoy each other's company in the sunshine, talking, playing catch, holding hands. But I was always by myself. Naoko, Midori, Nagasawa. All of them had gone away from where I stood. Now I had no one to say good morning to or have a nice day. I even missed Stormtrooper. I spent the whole month with this hopeless sense of isolation. I tried a few times to speak to Midori, but the answer I got from her was always the same. I don't want to talk to you now. And I knew from her tone of voice that she meant it. She was always with the girl with glasses, or else I saw her with a tall, short-haired guy. He had these incredibly long legs and always wore white basketball shoes. April ended and May came along, but May was even worse than April. In the deepening spring of May, I had no choice but to recognize the trembling of my heart. It usually happened as the sun was going down. In the pale evening gloom, when the soft fragrance of magnolias hung in the air, my heart would swell without warning, and tremble, and lurch with a stab of pain. I would try clamping my eyes shut and gritting my teeth, and wait for it to pass. And it would pass, but slowly, taking its own time, and leaving a dull ache behind. Those times I would write to Naoko. In my letters to her, I would describe only things that were touching or pleasant or beautiful. The fragrance of grasses, the caress of a spring breeze, the light of the moon, a movie I'd seen, a song I liked, a book that had moved me. I myself would be comforted by letters like this when I would reread what I had written. And I would feel that the world I lived in was a wonderful one. I wrote any number of letters like this. But from Naoko or Deiko, I heard nothing. At the restaurant where I worked, I got to know another student my age named Ito. It took quite a while before this gentle, quiet student from the oil painting department of an arts college would engage me in conversation. But eventually we started going to a nearby bar after work and talking about all kinds of things. He also liked to read and listen to music, and so we'd usually talk about books and records we liked. He was a slim, good-looking guy with much shorter hair and far cleaner clothes than the typical art student. He never had a lot to say, but he had his definite tastes and opinions. He liked French novels, especially those of Georges Bataille and Boris Vian. For music, he preferred Mozart and Ravel, and like me, he was looking for a friend with whom he could talk about such things. Ito once invited me to his apartment. It was not quite as hard to get to as mine, a strange one-floored apartment house behind Inokashira Park. His room was stuffed with painting supplies and canvas. I asked to see his work, but he said he was too embarrassed to show me anything. We drank some Chivas Regal that he had quietly removed from his father's place, broiled some smelts on his charcoal stove, and listened to Robert Casadesus playing a Mozart piano concerto. Ito was from Nagasaki. He had a girlfriend he would sleep with whenever he went home, he said, but things weren't going too well with her lately. You know what girls are like, he said. They turn 20 or 21, and all of a sudden they start having these concrete ideas. They get super realistic. And when that happens, everything that seems so sweet and lovable about them begins to look ordinary and depressing. Now when I see her, usually after we do it, she starts asking me, "What are you going to do after you graduate?" "Well, what are you going to do after you graduate?" I asked him. Munching on a mouthful of smelt, he shook his head. "What can I do? I'm in oil painting. Start worrying about stuff like that and nobody's going to major in oil painting. You don't do it to feed yourself." So she's like, "Why don't I come back to Nagasaki and become an art teacher?" She's planning to be an English teacher anymore, are you? That about sums it up, Ito admitted. And who the hell wants to be an art teacher? I'm not going to spend my whole fucking life teaching middle school monkeys how to draw. That's beside the point, I said. Don't you think you ought to break up with her, for both your sakes? Sure I do, but I don't know how to say it to her. She's planning to spend her life with me. How the hell can I say, "Hey, we ought to split up. I don't like you anymore"? We drank our Chivas straight, without ice. And when we ran out of smelts, we cut up some cucumbers and celery and dipped them in miso. When my teeth crunched down on my cucumber slices, I thought of Midori's father, which reminded me how flat and tasteless my life had become without Midori, and put me in a foul mood. Without my being aware of it, she had become a huge presence inside me. Got a girlfriend? Ito asked me. I do, I said. Then after a pause, added, but I can't be with her right now. But you understand each other's feelings, right? I like to think so. Otherwise, what's the point? I said with a chuckle. Ito talked in hushed tones about the greatness of Mozart. He knew Mozart inside out, the way a country boy knows his mountain trails. His father loved the music and had had him listening to it ever since he was tiny. I didn't know so much about classical music, but listening to this Mozart concerto with Ito's smart and heartfelt commentary, that part. How about that? I felt myself calming down for the first time in ages. We stared at the crescent moon hanging over Inokashira Park and drank our Chivas Regal to the last drop. Fantastic whiskey. Ito said I could spend the night there, but I told him I had something to do, thanked him for the whiskey, and left his apartment before 9. On the way back to my place, I called Midori from a public phone. She actually answered, much to my surprise. Sorry, she said, but I don't want to talk to you right now. I know, but I don't want our relationship to end like this. You're one of the very few friends I have, and it hurts not being able to see you. When am I going to be able to talk to you? I want you to tell me that much, at least. When I feel like talking to you, she said. How are you? I asked. Fine, she said, and hung up. A letter came from Deiko in the middle of May. Thanks for writing so often. Naoko enjoys your letters, and so do I. You don't mind if I read them, do you? Sorry I haven't been able to answer for such a long time. To tell you the truth, I've been feeling kind of exhausted, and there hasn't been much good news to report. Naoko's not doing well. Her mother came from Kobe the other day. The four of us, she and Naoko and the doctor and I, had a good long talk, and we reached the conclusion that Naoko should move to a real hospital for a while, for some intensive treatment, and then maybe come back here depending on the results. Naoko says she'd like to stay here if possible and make herself well, and I know I am going to miss her and worry about her, but the fact is that it's getting harder and harder to keep her under control here. She's fine most of the time, but sometimes her emotions become tremendously unstable, and when that happens, we can't take our eyes off her. There's no telling what she would do. When she has those intense episodes of hearing voices, she shuts down completely and burrows inside herself. Which is why I myself agree that the best thing for Naoko would be for her to receive therapy at a proper institution for a while. I hate to say it, but it's all we can do. As I told you once before, patience is the most important thing. We have to go on unraveling the jumbled threads one at a time without losing hope. No matter how hopeless her condition may appear to be, we are bound to find that one loose thread sooner or later. If you're in pitch blackness, all you can do is sit tight until your eyes get used to the dark. Naoko should have moved to that other hospital by the time you receive this. I'm sorry I waited to tell you until the decision had been made, but it happened very quickly. The new hospital is a really good one with good doctors. I'll write the address below. Please write to Naoko there. They will be keeping me informed of her progress too. So I will let you know what I hear. I hope it will be good news. I know this is going to be hard for you, but keep your hopes up. And even though Naoko is not here anymore, please write to me once in a while. Goodbye. I wrote a huge number of letters that spring. 1 a week to Naoko, several to Reiko, and several more to Midori. I wrote letters in the classroom. I wrote letters at my desk at home with Seagull in my lap. I wrote letters at empty tables during my breaks at the Italian restaurant. It was as if I were writing letters to hold together the pieces of my crumbling life. To Midori I wrote, April and May were painful, lonely months for me because I couldn't talk to you. I never knew that spring could be so painful and lonely. Better to have 3 Februaries than a spring like this. I know it's too late to be saying this to you, but your new hairstyle looks great on you. Really cute. I'm working in an Italian restaurant now, and the cook taught me a great way to make spaghetti. I'd like to make it for you soon. I went to school every day, worked in the restaurant 2 or 3 times a week, talked with Ito about books and music, read a few Boris Vian novels he lent me, wrote letters, played with Seagull, made spaghetti, worked in the garden, masturbated thinking of Naoko, and went to lots of movies. By the time Midori started talking to me, it was almost the middle of June. We hadn't said a word to each other for 2 months. After the end of one lecture, she sat down in the seat next to mine, propped her chin in her hand, and sat there saying nothing. Beyond the window, it was raining. A real rainy season rain, pouring straight down without any wind, soaking every single thing beneath. Long after the other students had filed out of the classroom, Midori went on sitting next to me without a word. Then she took a Marlboro from the pocket of her jeans jacket, put it between her lips, and handed me her matches. I struck a match and lit her cigarette. Midori pursed her lips and blew a gentle cloud of tobacco in my face. Like my hairstyle? She asked. It's great. How great? Great enough to knock down all the trees in all the forests of the world. You really think so? I really think so. She kept her eyes on mine for a while, then held her right hand out to me. I took it. She looked even more relieved than I felt. She tapped her ashes onto the floor and rose to her feet. Let's go eat. I'm starved, she said. Where do you want to go? I asked. To the Takashimaya department store restaurant in Nihonbashi, Why there, of all places? I like to go there sometimes, that's all. And so we took the subway to Nihonbashi. Maybe because it had been raining all morning, the place was practically empty. The smell of rain filled the big, cavernous department store, and all the employees had that what do we do now kind of look. Midori and I went to the basement restaurant, and after a close inspection of the plastic food in the window, both decided to have an old-fashioned cold lunch assortment with rice and pickles and grilled fish and tempura and teriyaki chicken. Inside, it was far from crowded despite the noon hour. Man, how long has it been since the last time I had lunch in a department store restaurant? I wondered aloud, drinking green tea from one of those slick white cups you can only find in a department store restaurant. I like to do stuff like this, said Midori. I don't know. It makes me feel like I'm doing something special. Probably reminds me of when I was a kid. My parents almost never took me to department stores. And I get the sneaking suspicion that's all mine ever did.
Lucky.
My mother was crazy about
talking
department
about?
stores. I don't particularly like going to department stores.
No, I mean, you were lucky they cared enough about you to take you places.
Well, I was an only child, I said.
When I was little, I used to dream about going to a department store restaurant all by myself when I grew up and eating anything I liked. But what an empty dream. What's the fun of cramming your mouth full of rice all alone in a place like this? The food's not all that great, and it's just big and crowded and stuffy and noisy. Still, every once in a while I think about coming here.
I've been really lonely these past 2 months, I said.
Yeah, I know. You told me in your letters,
Midori said, her voice flat.
Anyhow, let's eat. That's all I can think about now.
We finished all the little fried and broiled and pickled items in the separate compartments of our fancy lacquered half-moon lunch boxes, drank our clear soup from lacquered bowls, and our green tea from those white cups. Midori followed lunch with a cigarette. When she was done smoking, she stood up without a word and took her umbrella. I also stood up and took my umbrella. Where do you want to go now? I asked.
The roof, of course. That's the next stop when you've had lunch in a department store restaurant.
There was no one on the roof in the rain, no clerk in the pet supplies department, and the shutters were closed in the kiosks and the kids' rides ticket booth. We put up our umbrellas and wandered among the soaking wet wooden horses and garden chairs and stalls. It seemed incredible to me that there could be any place so devoid of people in the middle of Tokyo. Midori said she wanted to look through a telescope, so I put in a coin and held her umbrella over her while she squinted through the eyepiece. In one corner of the roof was the covered games area with a row of kids' rides. Midori and I sat next to each other on some kind of platform and looked at the rain.
So talk, Midori said. You've got something you want to say to me. I know.
I'm not trying to make excuses, I said. But I was really depressed that time. My brain was all fogged over. Nothing was registering with me. But one thing became crystal clear to me when I couldn't see you anymore. I realized that the only way I had been able to survive until then was having you in my life. When I lost you, the pain and loneliness really got to me.
Don't you have any idea how painful and lonely it's been for me without you these past 2 months?
This took me completely off guard. No, I said. It never occurred to me. I thought you were mad at me and didn't want to see me.
Of course I wanted to see you. I told you how much I like you. When I like somebody, I really like them. It doesn't turn on and off for me just like that. Don't you realize at least that much about me? Well, sure, but that's why I was so mad at you. I wanted to give you a good kick in the pants. I mean, we hadn't seen each other that whole time, and you were so spaced out thinking about this other girl you didn't even look at me. How could I not get mad at you? But aside from all that, I had been feeling for a long time that it would be better for me if I kept away from you for a while, to get things clear in my head.
What kind of things?
Our relationship, of course. It was getting to the point where I enjoyed being with you way better than being with him. I mean, don't you think there's something weird about that? And difficult? Of course I still like him. He's a little self-centered and narrow-minded and kind of a fascist, but he's got a lot of good points. And he's the first guy I ever got serious about. But you, well, you're special to me. When I'm with you, I feel something is just right. I believe in you. I like you. I don't want to let you go. I was getting more and more confused, so I went to him and asked him what I should do. He told me to stop seeing you. He said if I was going to see you, I should break up with him.
So what did you do?
I broke up with him, just like that.
Midori put a Marlboro in her mouth, shielded it with her hands as she lit up, and inhaled. Why?
Why? She screamed. Are you crazy? You know the English subjunctive. You understand trigonometry. You can read Marx, and you don't know the answer to something as simple as that? Why do you even have to ask? Why do you have to make a girl say something like this? I like you more than I like him. That's all. I wish I had fallen in love with somebody a little more handsome, of course, but I didn't. I fell in love with you.
I tried to speak, but I felt the words catching in my throat. Midori threw her cigarette into a puddle.
Will you please get that look off your face? You're going to make me cry. Don't worry, I know you're in love with somebody else. I'm not expecting anything from you. But the least you can do is give me a hug. These have been 2 tough months for me.
I put my umbrella up, and we went behind the games area and held each other close. Our bodies strained against each other, and our lips met. The smell of the rain clung to her hair and her jeans jacket. Girls' bodies were so soft and warm. I could feel her breasts pressing against my chest through our clothing. How long had it been since my last physical contact with another human being?
I saw you. That night I talked to him, and we broke up.
Midori said. I love you, I said to her. From the bottom of my heart. I don't ever want to let you go again. But there's nothing I can do. I can't make a move.
Because of her?
I nodded.
Tell me, have you slept with her?
Once, a year ago.
And you haven't seen her since then?
I have seen her, twice, but we didn't do anything.
Why not? Doesn't she love you?
That's hard to say, I said. It's really complicated and mixed up. And it's been going on for such a long time, I don't know what's what anymore. And neither does she. All I know is I have a kind of responsibility in all this as a human being, and I can't just turn my back on it. At least that's how I feel about it now. Even if she isn't in love with me.
Let me just tell you this, Watanabe, said Midori, pressing her cheek against my neck. I'm a real live girl, with real live blood gushing through my veins. You're holding me in your arms, and I'm telling you that I love you. I'm ready to do anything you tell me to do. I may be a little crazy, but I'm a good kid, and honest, and I work hard. I'm kind of cute. I've got nice boobs. I'm a good cook, and my father left me a trust fund. I mean, I'm a real bargain, don't you think? If you don't take me, I'm going to end up going somewhere else.
I need time, I said. I need time to think and sort things out, and make some decisions. I'm sorry, but that's all I can say at this point.
Yeah, but you do love me from the bottom of your heart, right? And you never want to let me go again, right?
I said it, and I meant it. Midori pulled away from me with a smile on her face.
Okay, I'll wait. I believe in you, she said. But when you take me, you take only me. And when you hold me in your arms, you think only about me. Is that clear?
I know exactly what you mean,
I don't care what you do to me, but I don't want you to hurt me. I've had enough hurt already in my life. More than enough. Now I want to be happy.
I drew her close and kissed her on the mouth.
Drop the damn umbrella and wrap both your arms around me. Hard, she said.
But we'll get soaking wet.
So what? I want you to stop thinking and hold me tight. I've been waiting 2 whole months for this.
And held her close in the rain. The dull rush of tires on the highway enveloped us like a fog. The rain fell without a break, without a sound, soaking her hair and mine, running like tears down our cheeks, down to her jeans jacket and my yellow nylon windbreaker, spreading in dark stains. What do you say we go back under the roof? I said.
Come to my place. There's nobody home now. We'll both catch colds like this.
It's true.
It's kind of like we just swam across a river, Midori said, smiling. What a great feeling.
We bought a good-sized towel in the linen department and took turns going into the bathroom to dry our hair. Then we rode the subway with the necessary transfers to her apartment in Myogadani. She let me shower first, and then she showered. Lending me a bathrobe to wear while my clothes dried, Midori changed into a polo shirt and skirt. We sat at the kitchen table drinking coffee.
Tell me about yourself, Midori said.
What about me?
I don't know. What do you hate?
Chicken and VD and barbers who talk too much.
What else?
Lonely April nights and lacy telephone covers.
What else?
I shook my head. I can't think of anything else.
My boyfriend, which is to say my ex-boyfriend, had all kinds of things he hated, like when I wore too short skirts, or when I smoked, or how I got drunk right away, or said disgusting things, or criticized his friends. So if there's anything about me you don't like, just tell me, and I'll fix it if I can.
I can't think of anything, I said after giving it some thought. There's nothing.
Really?
I like everything you wear. And I like what you do and say and how you walk and how you get drunk. Everything.
You mean I'm really okay just the way I am?
I don't know how you could change, so you must be fine the way you are.
How much do you love me? Midori asked.
Enough to melt all the tigers in the world to butter, I said.
She said with a hint of satisfaction. Will you hold me again?
We got into her bed and held each other, kissing as the sound of the rain filled our ears. Then we talked about everything from the formation of the universe to our preferences and the hardness of boiled eggs.
I wonder what ants do on rainy days, Midori asked.
No idea, I said. They're hard workers, so they probably spend the day cleaning house or taking inventory.
If they work so hard, how come they don't evolve? They've been the same forever.
I don't know, I said. Maybe their body structure isn't suited to evolving, compared with monkeys, say.
There's a lot of stuff you don't know. I thought you knew everything.
It's a big world out there, I said.
High mountains, deep oceans, Midori said.
She put her hand inside my bathrobe and took hold of my erection. Then, with a gulp, she said,
Hey, Watanabe, all kidding aside, this is not going to work. I could never get this big, hard thing inside me. No way.
You're kidding, I said with a sigh.
Yep, she said, giggling. Don't worry, it'll be just fine. I'm sure it'll fit. Mind if I have a look?
Feel free. Midori burrowed under the covers and groped me all over down there, stretching the skin of my penis, weighing my testicles in her palm. Then she poked her head out and released her breath.
I love it, she said. No flattery intended. I really love it.
Thank you, I said with simple gratitude.
But really, Watanabe, you don't want to do it with me, do you? Until you get all that business straightened out.
There's no way I don't want to do it with you, I said. I'm going crazy. I wanted to do it so bad, but it just wouldn't be right.
You're so damn stubborn. If I were you, I'd just do it and think about it afterward.
You would?
Just kidding, Midori said in a tiny voice. I probably wouldn't do it either, if I were you. And that's what I love about you. That's what I really, really love about you.
How much do you love me? I asked. But she didn't answer. Instead, she pressed against me, put her lips on my nipple, and began to move the hand she had wrapped around my penis. The first thing that occurred to me was how different this was from the way Naoko moved her hand. Both were gentle and wonderful. But something was different about the way they did it, and so it felt like a totally different experience.
Hey, Watanabe, I bet you're thinking about that other girl.
Not true. I lied.
Really?
Really.
Because I would really hate that.
I can't think about anybody else, I said.
Want to touch my breasts? Or down there?
Midori asked. Oh boy, I'd love to, but I better not. If we do all those things at once, it'll be too much for me. Midori nodded and rustled around under the covers, pulling her panties off and holding them against the tip of my penis.
You can come into this, she said.
But it'll make a mess of them.
Stop it, will you? You're going to make me cry,
Midori said as if on the verge of tears.
All I have to do is watch them, so don't hold back. Just let yourself come all you want. If you're worried about my panties, buy me a new pair. Or are they going to keep you from coming because they're mine?
No way, I said.
Go right ahead then. Let go.
Midori inspected my semen.
Wow, that's a huge amount.
Too much?
Nah, that's okay, silly. Come all you want,
she said with a smile. Then she kissed me. In the evening, Midori did some shopping in the neighborhood and made dinner. We ate tempura and rice with green peas at the kitchen table and washed it all down with beer.
Eat a lot and make lots of semen, Midori said. Then I'll be nice and help you get rid of it.
Thanks very much, I said.
I know all kinds of ways to do it. I learned from the women's magazines when we had the bookstore. Once, they had this special edition all about how to take care of your husband so he won't cheat on you while you're pregnant and can't have sex. There's tons of ways. Want to try them?
I can hardly wait, I said. After saying goodbye to Midori, I bought a newspaper at the station. But when I opened it on the train, I realized I had absolutely no desire to read a paper, and in fact couldn't understand what it said. All I could do was glare at the incomprehensible page of print and wonder what was going to happen to me from now on, and how the things around me would be changing. I felt as if the world was pulsating every now and then. I released a deep sigh and closed my eyes. With regard to what I had done that day, I felt not the slightest regret. I knew for certain that if I had it to do all over again, I would live this day in exactly the same way again. I would hold Midori tight on the roof in the rain. I would get soaking wet with her. And I would let her fingers bring me to climax in her bed. I had no doubts about those things. I loved Midori. And I was happy that she had come back to me. The two of us could make it, that was certain. As Midori herself had said, she was a real live girl with blood in her veins, and she was putting her warm body in my arms. It had been all I could do to suppress the intense desire I had to strip her naked, throw open her body, and sink myself in her warmth. There was no way I could have made myself stop her once she was holding my penis and moving her hand. I wanted her to do it. She wanted to do it. And we were in love. Who could have stopped such a thing? It was true. I loved Midori. And I had probably known as much for a while. I had just been avoiding the conclusion for a very long time. The problem was that I could never explain these developments to Naoko. It would have been hard enough at any point. But with Naoko in her present condition, There was no way I could tell her I had fallen in love with another girl. And besides, I still loved Naoko. Bent and twisted as that love might be, I did love her. Somewhere inside me, there was still preserved a broad open space, untouched, for Naoko,
One thing I
and
could
no
do
one
was
else.
to
To
write
write a letter to Reiko that confessed everything with total honesty. At home, I sat on the veranda, watching the rain pour down on the garden at night and assembling phrases in my head. Then I went to my desk and wrote the letter. It is almost unbearable to me that I now have to write a letter like this to you, I began. I summarized my relationship with Midori and explained what had happened that day. I have always loved Naoko, and I still love her. But there is a decisive finality to what exists between Midori and me. It has an irresistible power that is bound to sweep me into the future. What I feel for Naoko is a tremendously quiet and gentle and transparent love. But what I feel for Midori is a wholly different emotion. It stands and walks on its own, living and breathing and throbbing and shaking me to the roots of my being. I don't know what to do. I'm confused. I'm not trying to make excuses for myself, but I do believe that I have lived as sincerely as I knew how. I have never lied to anyone, and I have taken care over the years not to hurt other people. And yet, I find myself having been tossed into this labyrinth. How can this be? I can't explain it. I don't know what I should do. Can you tell me, Reiko? You're the only one I can turn to for advice. I mailed the letter that night with special delivery postage attached. Reiko's answer came 5 days later, dated June 17th. Let me start with the good news. Naoko has been improving far more rapidly than anyone could have expected. I talked to her once on the phone, and she spoke with real lucidity. She may even be able to come back here before too long. Now, about you. I think you take everything too seriously. Loving another person is a wonderful thing, and if that love is sincere, no one ends up tossed into a labyrinth. You have to have more faith in yourself. My advice to you is very simple. First of all, if you are drawn so strongly to this person, Midori, it is only natural for you to have fallen in love with her. It might go well, or it might not. But love is like that. When you fall in love, the natural thing to do is give yourself to it. That's what I think. It's just one form of sincerity. Second, as to whether or not you should have sex with Midori, that is for you to figure out. I can't say a thing. Talk it over with Midori and reach your own conclusion, one that makes sense to you. Don't tell any of this to Naoko. If things should develop to the point where you absolutely have to tell her, then you and I will come up with a good plan together. So now, just keep it quiet. Leave it to me. The fourth thing I have to say is that you have been such a great source of strength for Naoko that even if you no longer have the feelings of a lover toward her, there's still a lot you can do for her. So don't brood over everything in that super serious way of yours. All of us, by which I mean all of us, both normal and not so normal, are imperfect human beings living in an imperfect world. We don't live with the mechanical precision of a bank account or by measuring all our lines and angles with rulers and protractors. Am I right? My own personal feeling is that Midori sounds like a great girl. I understand just reading your letter why you would be drawn to her. And I understand, too, why you would also be drawn to Naoko. There's nothing the least bit sinful about it. Things like that happen all the time in this great big world of ours. It's like taking a boat out on a beautiful lake on a beautiful day and thinking both the sky and the lake are beautiful. So stop eating yourself up alive. Things will go where they're supposed to go if you just let them take their natural course.
Despite your best efforts, people are going to be hurt when it's time for them to be hurt. Life is like that. I know I sound like I'm preaching from a podium, but it's about time for you to learn to live like this. You try too hard to make life fit your way of doing things. If you don't want to spend time in an insane asylum, you have to open up a little more and let yourself go with life's natural flow. I'm just a powerless and imperfect woman. But still, there are times when I think to myself how wonderful life can be. Believe me, it's true. So stop what you're doing this minute and get happy. Work at making yourself happy. Needless to say, I do feel sorry that you and Naoko could not see things through to a happy ending. But who can say what's best? That's why you need to grab whatever chance you have for happiness where you find it, and not worry too much about other people. My experience tells me that we get no more than 2 or 3 such chances in a lifetime. And if we let them go, we regret it for the rest of our lives. I'm playing the guitar every day for no one in particular. It seems kind of pointless. I don't like dark, rainy nights either. I hope I'll have another chance to play my guitar and eat grapes with you and Naoko in the room with me. Ah, well. Until then. Reiko Ishida.
Norwegian This wood. Ends Disc 10. Disc 11.
Chapter 11. Reiko wrote to me several times after Naoko's death. It was not my fault, she said. It was nobody's fault, any more than you could blame someone for the rain. But I never answered her. What could I have said? What good would it have done? Naoko no longer existed in this world. She had become a fistful of ash. They held a quiet funeral for Naoko in Kobe at the end of August. And when it was over, I went back to Tokyo. I told my landlord I would be away for a while, and my boss at the Italian restaurant that I wouldn't be coming into work. To Midori, I wrote a short note. I couldn't say anything just yet, but I hoped she would wait for me a little longer. I spent the next 3 days in movie theaters, and after I had seen every new movie in Tokyo, I packed my knapsack, took all my money out of the bank, went to Shinjuku Station, and took the first express train I could find heading out of town. Where I went in my travels, it's impossible for me to recall. I remember the sights and sounds and smells clearly enough, but the names of the towns are gone, as well as any sense of the order in which I traveled from place to place. I would move from town to town by train or bus or hitching a ride in a truck, spreading my sleeping bag out in empty lots or stations or parks or on riverbanks or the seashore. I once got them to let me sleep in the corner of a neighborhood police station, and another time slept by the side of a graveyard. I didn't care where I slept, as long as I was out of people's way and could stay in my sack as long as I felt like it. Exhausted from walking, I would crawl into my sleeping bag, gulp down some cheap whiskey, and go right to sleep. In nice towns, people would bring me food and mosquito coils, and in not-so-nice towns, people would call the police and have me chased out of parks. It made no difference to me one way or the other. All I wanted was to put myself to sleep in towns I didn't know. When I ran low on money, I would work as a laborer for a few days until I had what I needed. There was always some work for me to do. I just kept moving from one town to the next, no destination in mind. The world was big and full of weird things and strange people. One time I called Midori because I had to hear her voice. "School started a long time ago, you know," she said. "Some courses are even asking for papers already. What are you going to do? Do you realize you've been out of touch for 3 whole weeks now? Where are you?" "Sorry.
What are you doing?"
"I can't go back to Tokyo yet." "Not yet."
And that's all you're going to tell me?
There's really nothing more I can say at this point. Maybe in October. Midori hung up without a word. I went on with my travels. Every once in a while, I'd stay at a flop house and take a bath and shave. What I saw in the mirror looked terrible. The sun had dried my skin out. My eyes were sunken, and some odd stains and cuts marked my bony cheeks. I looked as if I had just crawled out of a cave somewhere. But it was me after all. It was me. By that time, I was moving down the coast as far from Tokyo as I could get. Maybe in Tottori, or the northern shore of Hyogo. Walking along the seashore was easy. I could always find a comfortable place to sleep in the sand. I'd make a fire from driftwood and roast some dried fish I bought from a local fisherman. Then I'd swallow some whiskey and listen to the waves while I thought about Naoko. It was too strange to think that she was dead and no longer part of this world. I couldn't absorb the truth of it. I couldn't believe it. I had heard the nails being driven into the lid of her coffin, but I still couldn't adjust to the fact that she had returned to nothingness. No, the image of her was still too vivid in my memory. I could still see her enclosing my penis in her mouth, her hair falling across my belly. I could still feel her warmth, her breath against me, and that helpless moment when I could do nothing but come. I could bring all this back as clearly as if it had happened 5 minutes earlier, and I felt sure that Naoko was still beside me, that I could just reach out and touch her. But no, she was not there. Her flesh no longer existed in this world. Nights when it was impossible for me to sleep, the images of Naoko would come back to me. There was no way I could stop them. Too many memories of her were crammed inside me, and as soon as one of them found the slightest opening, the rest would force their way out in an endless stream, an unstoppable flood. Naoko in her yellow rain cape cleaning the birdhouse and carrying the feed bag that rainy morning. The caved-in birthday cake and the feel of Naoko's tears soaking through my shirt. Yes, it had been raining then too. Naoko walking beside me in winter, wearing her camel's hair coat. Naoko touching the barrette she always wore. Naoko peering at me with those incredibly clear eyes of hers. Naoko sitting on the sofa, legs drawn up beneath her blue nightgown, chin resting on her knees. Memories would slam against me like the waves of an incoming tide, sweeping my body along to some strange new place. A place where I lived with the dead. There Naoko lived, and I could speak with her and hold her in my arms. Death in that place was not a decisive element that brought life to an end. There, death was but one of many elements comprising life. There Naoko lived with death inside her. And to me she said, "Don't worry, it's only death. Don't let it bother you." I felt no sadness in that strange place. Death was death, and Naoko was Naoko. "What's the problem?" she asked me with a bashful smile. "I'm here, aren't I?" Her familiar little gestures soothed my heart and gave me healing. If this is death, I thought to myself, then death is not so bad. "It's true," said Naoko. "Death is nothing much. It's just death. Things are so easy for me here." Naoko spoke to me in the spaces between the crashing of the dark waves. Eventually, though, the tide would pull back, and I would be left on the beach alone. Powerless, I could go nowhere. Sorrow itself would envelop me in deep darkness until the tears came. I felt less that I was crying than that the tears were simply oozing out of me like perspiration. I had learned one thing from Kizuki's death, and I believed that I had made it a part of myself in the form of a philosophy. Death is not the opposite of life, but an innate part of life. By living our lives, we nurture death. True as this might be, it was only one of the truths we had to learn. What I learned from Naoko's death was this: no truth can cure the sorrow we feel from losing a loved one. No truth, no sincerity, no strength, no kindness can cure that sorrow. All we can do is see it through to the end and learn something from it. But what we learn will be no help in facing the next sorrow that comes to us without warning. Hearing the waves at night, listening to the sound of the wind, day after day, I focused on these thoughts of mine. Knapsack on my back, sand in my hair. I moved farther and farther west, surviving on a diet of whiskey, bread, and water. One windy evening, as I lay wrapped in my sleeping bag, weeping, by the side of an abandoned hulk, a young fisherman happened by and offered me a cigarette. I accepted it, and had my first smoke in over a year. He asked why I was crying, and almost by reflex I told him that my mother had died. I couldn't take the sadness, I said, and so I was on the road. He expressed his deep sympathy and brought a big bottle of sake and 2 glasses from his house. The wind tore along the sandy beach as we sat there drinking. He told me that he had lost his mother when he was 16. Never healthy, she had worn herself out working from morning to night. I half listened to him, sipping my sake and grunting in response every now and then. I felt as if I were hearing a story from some far-off world. What the hell was this guy talking about, I wondered. And all of a sudden, an intense rage struck me. I wanted to wring his neck. Who gives a damn about your mother? I lost Naoko. Her beautiful flesh has vanished from this world. Why the hell are you telling me about your goddamn mother? But my rage disappeared as quickly as it had flared up. I closed my eyes and went on half listening to the fisherman's endless talk. Eventually, he asked me if I had eaten. No, I said, but in my knapsack I had bread and cheese, a tomato, and a piece of chocolate. What had I eaten for lunch? He asked. Bread and cheese, tomato, and chocolate, I answered. Wait here, he said, and ran off. I tried to stop him, but he disappeared into the darkness without looking back. All I could do was go on drinking my sake. The shore was littered with paper flecks from fireworks that had been exploded on the sand, and waves crashed against the beach with a mad roar. A scrawny dog came along, wagging its tail and sniffing around my little campfire for something to eat, but eventually gave up and wandered off. The young fisherman came back a half hour later with 2 boxes of sushi and a new bottle of sake. I should eat the top box right away because that had fish in it, he said. But the bottom box had only nori rolls and deep-fried tofu skins, so they would last through tomorrow. He filled both our glasses with sake from the new bottle. I thanked him and polished off the whole top box myself, though it had more than enough for 2. After we had drunk as much sake as we could manage, he offered to put me up for the night. But when I said I would rather sleep alone on the beach, he left it at that. As he stood to go, he took a folded 5,000 yen note from his pocket and shoved it into the pocket of my shirt. Here, he said, get yourself some healthy food. You look awful. I said he had done more than enough for me and that I couldn't accept money on top of everything else, but he refused to take it back. It's not money, he said. It's my feelings. Don't think about it too much. Just take it. All I could do was thank him and accept the money. I suddenly thought about my old girlfriend, the one I had first slept with in my 3rd year of high school. Chills ran through me as I realized how badly I had treated her. I had hardly ever thought about her thoughts or feelings or the pain I had caused her. She was such a sweet and gentle thing. But at the time, I had taken her sweetness for granted, and later hardly gave her a second thought. What was she doing now? I wondered. And had she forgiven me? A wave of nausea came over me, and I vomited by the old ship. My head hurt from too much sake, and I felt bad about having lied to the fisherman and taken his money. It was time for me to get back to Tokyo, I decided. I couldn't keep this up forever. I stuffed my sleeping bag into my knapsack, slipped my arms through the straps, and walked to the local railway station. I told the man at the ticket window that I wanted to go to Tokyo as soon as possible. He checked his schedule and said I could make it as far as Osaka by morning if I transferred from one night train to another. Then I could take the bullet train from there. I thanked him and used the 5,000 yen bill I had gotten from the fisherman to buy a ticket to Tokyo. Waiting for the train, I bought a newspaper and checked the date. October 2nd, 1970. So I had been traveling for a full month. I knew I had to go back to the real world. The month of traveling neither lifted my spirits nor softened the blow of Naoko's death. I arrived back in Tokyo in pretty much the same state in which I had left. I couldn't even bring myself to phone Midori. What could I say to her? How could I begin? It's all over now, you and I can be happy together? No, that was out of the question. However I might phrase it, though, the facts were the same. Naoko was dead, and Midori was still here. Naoko was a pile of white ash, and Midori was a living, breathing human being. I was overcome with a sense of my own defilement. Though I returned to Tokyo, I did nothing for days but shut myself up in my room. My memory remained fixed on the dead rather than the living. The rooms I had set aside in there for Naoko were shuttered, the furniture draped in white, the windowsills dusty. I spent the better part of each day in those rooms, and I thought about Kizuki. So you finally made Naoko yours, I heard myself telling him. Oh well. She was yours to begin with. Now maybe she's where she belongs. But in this world, in this imperfect world of the living, I did the best I could for Naoko. I tried to establish a new life for the two of us. But forget it, Kizuki. I'm giving her to you. You're the one she chose, after all. In woods as dark as the depths of her own heart, she hanged herself. Once upon a time, you dragged a part of me into the world of the dead. And now Naoko has dragged another part of me into that world. Sometimes I feel like a caretaker of a museum. A huge, empty museum where no one ever comes. And I'm watching over it for no one but myself. The fourth day after my return to Tokyo, I got a letter from Reiko. Special delivery. It was a simple note. I haven't been able to get in touch with you for weeks, and I'm worried. Please give me a call. At 9 a.m. and 9 p.m., I will be waiting by the telephone. I called her at 9 o'clock that night. Reiko picked up after one ring. Are you okay? She asked. More or less, I said. Do you mind if I come visit you the day after tomorrow? Visit me? You mean here in Tokyo? That's exactly what I mean. I want to have a good, long talk with you. You're leaving the sanatorium. It's the only way I can come see you, isn't it? Anyway, it's about time for me to get out of this place. I've been here 8 years after all. If they keep me any longer, I'll start to rot. I found it difficult to speak. After a short silence, Reiko went on.
I'll be on the 3:20 bullet train the day after tomorrow. Will you meet me at the station? Do you still remember what I look like? Or have you lost interest in me now that Naoko's dead?
No way, I said. See you at Tokyo Station the day after tomorrow at 3:20.
You won't have any trouble recognizing me. I'm the old lady with the guitar case. There aren't many of those.
And in fact, I had no trouble finding Reiko in the crowd. She wore a man's tweed jacket, white slacks, and red sneakers. Her hair was as short as ever, with the usual clumps sticking up. In her right hand, she held a brown leather suitcase, and in her left hand, a black guitar case. She gave me a big, wrinkly smile the moment she spotted me, and I found myself smiling back. I took her suitcase and walked beside her to the train for the western suburbs.
Hey, Watanabe, how long have you been wearing that awful face? Or is that the in look in Tokyo these days?
I was traveling for a while, ate junk the whole time, I said. How'd you like the bullet train?
Awful, she said. You can't open the windows. I wanted to buy a box lunch from one of the platform vendors.
They sell them on board, you know.
Yeah, overpriced plastic sandwiches. A starving horse wouldn't touch that stuff. I always used to enjoy the box lunches at Gotemba Station.
Once upon a time, before the bullet train.
Well, I'm from once upon a time before the bullet train.
On the way out to Kichijoji, Reiko watched the Musashino landscape passing the train window with all the curiosity of a tourist. Has it changed much in 8 years? I asked.
You don't know what I'm feeling now, do you, Watanabe? I'm scared.
No, I don't,
she said. So scared I could go crazy just like that. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Flung out here all by myself.
She paused.
But go crazy just like that? Kind of a cool expression, don't you think?
I smiled and took her hand. Don't worry, I said. You're going to be okay. Your own strength got you this far.
It wasn't my own strength that got me out of that place, Reiko said. It was Naoko and you. I couldn't stand it there without Naoko. And I had to come to Tokyo to talk with you. That's all. If nothing had happened, I probably would have spent the rest of my life there.
I nodded. What are you planning to do from now on? I asked Reiko.
I'm going to Asahikawa, she said. Way up in the wilds of Hokkaido. An old college friend of mine runs a music school there, and she's been asking me for 2 or 3 years now to help her out. I told her it was too cold for me. I finally get my freedom back and I'm supposed to go to Asahikawa? It's kind of hard to get excited about a place like that. Some hole in the ground.
It's not so awful, I said, laughing. I've been there. It's not a bad little town. Got its own special atmosphere.
Are you sure?
Absolutely. It's way better than staying in Tokyo.
Oh, well, she said. I don't have any place else to go. And I've already sent my stuff there. Hey, Watanabe, promise me you'll come and visit me in Asahikawa.
Sure, I will. But do you have to leave right away? Can't you stay in Tokyo a while?
I'd like to hang around here a few days if I can. Can you put me up? I won't get in your way.
No problem, I said. I've got a big closet I can sleep in my sleeping bag.
I can't do that to you.
No, really. It's a huge closet. Reiko tapped out a rhythm on the guitar case between her legs.
I'm probably going to have to condition myself a little before I go to Asahikawa. I'm just not used to being in the outside world. There's a lot of stuff I don't get, and I'm nervous. Think you can help me out a little? You're the only one I can ask.
I'll do anything I can to help you, I said.
I hope I'm not getting in your way, she said.
I don't have any way for you to get in, I said. She looked at me and turned up the corners of her mouth in a smile, but said nothing. We hardly talked the rest of the way to Kichijoji Station or on the bus to my place. We traded a few random comments on the changes in Tokyo and Reiko's time at the College of Music and my one trip to Asahikawa, but said nothing about Naoko. 10 months had gone by since I last saw Reiko, but walking by her side, I felt strangely calmed and comforted. This was a familiar feeling, I thought. And then it occurred to me it was the way I used to feel when walking the streets of Tokyo with Naoko. And just as Naoko and I had shared the dead Kizuki, Reiko and I shared the dead Naoko. This thought made it impossible for me to go on talking. Reiko continued speaking for a while, but when she realized that I wasn't saying anything, she also fell silent. Neither of us said a word on the bus. It was one of those early autumn afternoons when the light is sharp and clear, exactly as it had been a year earlier when I visited Naoko in Kyoto. The clouds were white and narrow as bones, the sky wide open and high. The fragrance of the breeze, the tone of the light, the presence of tiny flowers in the grass, the subtle reverberations that accompanied sounds. All these told me that autumn had come again, increasing the distance between me and the dead with each cycle of the seasons. Kizuki was still 17, and Naoko 21, forever.
"Oh, what a relief to come to a place like this,"
Reiko said, looking all around as we stepped off the bus. "'Cause there's nothing here," I said. As I led her through the back gate and the garden to my cottage, Reiko was impressed by everything she saw.
"This is terrific," she said. "You made these shelves and the desk?"
"Sure did," I said, pouring tea.
"You're obviously good with your hands, and you keep the place so clean."
"Stormtrooper's influence," I said. "He made me clean crazy. Not that my landlord's complaining."
"Oh, your landlord. I have to go introduce myself to him. That's his place on the other side of the garden, I suppose."
"Introduce yourself to him? What for?"
"What do you mean, what for? Some weird old lady shows up in your place and starts picking on the guitar? He's going to wonder what's going on. Better to start out on the right foot. I even brought a box of tea sweets for him."
"Very clever," I said.
"The wisdom that comes with age. I'm going to tell him I'm your aunt on your mother's side, visiting from Kyoto, so don't contradict me. The age difference comes in handy at times like this. Nobody's going to get suspicious."
Reiko took the box of sweets from her bag and went off to pay her respects. I sat on the veranda, drinking another cup of tea and playing with the cat. 20 minutes went by, and when Reiko finally came back, she pulled a tin of rice crackers from her bag and said it was a present for me. "What were you talking about so long over there?" I asked, munching on a cracker.
"You, of course," said
Reiko, cradling the cat and rubbing her cheek against it.
"He says you're a very proper young man, a serious student."
"Are you sure he was talking about me?"
"There is not the slightest doubt in my mind that he was talking about you," she said with a laugh.
Then, noticing my guitar, she picked it up, adjusted the tuning, and played Antonio Carlos Jobim's Desafinado. It had been months since I had last heard Reiko's guitar, and it gave me the old, warm feeling.
"You practicing the guitar?"
she asked. It was kicking around the landlord's storehouse, so I borrowed it and plunk on it once in a while, that's all.
"I'll give you a lesson later, absolutely free."
Reiko put the guitar down and took off her tweed jacket. Sitting against the veranda post, she smoked a cigarette. She was wearing a Madras short-sleeved shirt, she asked. "It is," I said. In fact, it was a good-looking shirt, with a handsome pattern.
"It's Naoko's," said Reiko. "I bet you didn't know we were the same size, especially when she first came to the sanatorium. She put on a little weight after that, but still we were pretty much the same size. Blouses, slacks, shoes, hats. Bras were about the only thing we couldn't share. I've got practically nothing here, so we were always trading clothes. Actually, it was more like joint ownership."
Now that she mentioned it, I saw that Reiko's build was almost identical to Naoko's. Because of the shape of her face and her thin arms and legs, she had always given me the impression of being smaller and slimmer than Naoko. But in fact, she was surprisingly solid.
"The jacket and pants are hers too," said Reiko. "It's all hers. Does it bother you to see me wearing her stuff?"
"Not at all," I said. "I'm sure Naoko would be glad to have somebody wearing her clothing, especially you."
"It's strange," Reiko said with a little snap of the fingers. "Naoko didn't leave a will or anything, except where her clothes were concerned. She scribbled one line on a memo pad on her desk. 'Please give all my clothes to Reiko.' She was a funny one, don't you think? Why would she be concerned about her clothes of all things when she's getting ready to die? Who gives a damn about clothes? She must have had tons of other things she wanted to say."
"Maybe not," I said. Puffing on her cigarette, Reiko seemed lost in thought. Then she said,
"You want to hear the whole story in order, I suppose?"
"I do," I said. "Please tell me everything."
Tests at the hospital in Osaka showed that Naoko's condition was improving for the moment, but that she should stay there on a somewhat longer-term basis so that they could continue the intensive therapy for its future benefits. I told you that much in my letter. The one I sent you somewhere around the 10th of August.
Right. I read that letter.
Well, on the 24th of August, I got a call from Naoko's mother asking if it was okay for Naoko to come visit me at the sanatorium. Naoko wanted to pack up the things she had left with me, and because she wouldn't be able to see me for a while, she wanted to have a nice long talk with me, and maybe spend one night in our apartment. I said that would be fine. I wanted to see her, something awful, and to have a talk with her. So Naoko and her mother showed up the next day, the 25th, in a taxi. The three of us worked together, packing up Naoko's things and chatting away. Late in the afternoon, Naoko said it would be okay for her mother to go home, that she'd be fine. So they called a cab and the mother left because Naoko seemed to be in such great spirits. In fact, until then, I had been very worried. I had been expecting her to be depressed and worn out and emaciated. I mean, I knew how much the kind of testing and therapy and stuff they do at those hospitals can take out of you. So I had some real doubts about this visit. But one look at her was all it took to convince me she'd be okay. She looked a lot healthier than I had imagined, and she was smiling and joking around and talking in a much more normal way than when I had last seen her. She had been to the beauty parlor and was showing off her new hairdo. So I figured there would be nothing to worry about even if her mother left the two of us alone. Naoko told me that this time she was going to let those hospital doctors cure her once and for all, and I said that that would probably be the best thing to do. So then the two of us went out for a walk, still talking the whole time, mainly about the future. Naoko told me that what she'd really like was for the two of us to get out of the sanatorium and go live together somewhere.
"Live together? You and Naoko?"
"That's right,"
said Reiko with a little shrug.
So I told her it sounded good to me. "But what about Watanabe?" And she said, "Don't worry, I'll get everything straight with him." That's all. Then she talked about where she and I would live and what we'd do, that kind of thing. After that, we went to the birdhouse and played with the birds.
I took a beer from the refrigerator and opened it. Reiko lit another cigarette. The cat was sound asleep in her lap.
That girl had everything figured out for herself. I'm sure that's why she was so full of energy and smiling and healthy looking. It must have been such a load off her mind to feel she knew exactly what she was going to do. So then we finished going through her stuff and throwing what she didn't need into the metal drum in the yard and burning it. The notebooks she had been using to keep a diary, and all the letters she had been getting. Your letters, too. This seemed kind of strange to me, so I asked her why she was burning stuff like that. I mean, she had always been so careful about putting your letters away in a safe place and reading them over and over. She said, "I'm getting rid of everything from the past so I can be reborn in the future." I guess I pretty much took her at her word. It had its own kind of logic to it, sort of. I remember thinking how much I wanted for her to get healthy and happy. She was so sweet and lovely that day. I wish you could have seen her. When that was over, we went to the dining hall for supper the way we used to do. Then we bathed, and I opened a bottle of good wine that I had been keeping for a special occasion like this, and we drank, and I played the guitar. The Beatles, as always. Norwegian Wood, Michelle. All of us were feeling pretty good. We turned out the lights, got undressed, and lay in our beds. It was one of those steaming hot nights. We had the windows wide open, but there was hardly a breath of wind. It was black as ink outside. The crickets were screaming, and the smell of the summer grass was so thick in the room, it was hard to breathe. All of a sudden, Naoko started talking about you. About the night she had sex with you. In incredible detail. How you took her clothes off. How you touched her. How she found herself growing wet. How you went inside her. How wonderful it felt. She told me all of this in vivid detail. So I asked her, "Why are you telling me this now, all of a sudden?" I mean, up to then, she had never spoken openly to me about sex. Of course, we had had some frank talk about sex as a kind of therapy, but she had been too embarrassed to get into anything specific. Now I couldn't stop her. I was shocked. So she says, "I don't know, I just feel like talking about it. I'll stop if you'd rather not hear it." I said, "No, that's okay. If you've got something you need to talk about, you better get it all out. I'll listen to anything you have to say." So she went on with her story. When he went inside me, I couldn't believe how much it hurt. It was my first time, after all. I was so wet he slipped right in, but still my brain fogged over. It hurt so much. He put it in as far as he could, I thought. But then he lifted my legs and went in even farther. That sent chills all through my body like I was soaking in ice water. My arms and legs went numb, and a wave of cold went through me. I didn't know what was happening. I thought I might die right then and there, and I didn't care one way or the other. But he realized I was in pain, so he stopped moving. And still deep inside me, he started kissing me all over. My hair, my neck, my breasts, for a long, long time. Little by little, the warmth returned to my body, and then very slowly he started to move. Oh, Deiko, it was so wonderful. Now it felt as if my brain was just going to melt away. I wanted to stay like that forever, to stay in his arms for the rest of my life. That's how great it was. So I said to her, "If it was so great, why didn't you just stay with Watanabe and keep doing it every day?" But she said, "No, Deiko, I knew it would never happen again. I knew this was something that would come to me once and leave and never come back. This would be a once-in-a-lifetime thing. I had never felt anything like it before, and I've never felt anything like it since. I've never felt that I wanted to do it again. And I've never grown wet like that again." I explained to her that this was something that often happened to young women, and that in most cases it cures itself with age. And after all, it had worked that one time. There was no need to worry it wouldn't happen again. I myself had had all kinds of trouble when I was first married. "But," she said, "no, that's not it, Deiko. I'm not worried about that at all. I just don't want anybody going inside me again. I just don't want to be violated like that again. By anybody." I drank down my beer, and Deiko finished her second cigarette. The cat stretched itself in Deiko's lap, found a new position, and went back to sleep. Deiko seemed at a loss how to go on until she had lit her third cigarette. After that, Naoko began to sob. I sat on the edge of her bed and stroked her hair. "Don't worry," I said. "Everything is going to be all right. A beautiful young girl like you has got to have a man to hold her and make her happy." Naoko was drenched in sweat and tears. I got a bath towel and dried her face and body. Even her panties were soaked. So I helped her out of them. Now wait a minute, don't get any strange ideas. There was nothing funny going on. We always used to bathe together. She was like my little sister. I know, I said. Well, anyway, Naoko said that she wanted me to hold her. I said it was way too hot for holding, but she said it was the last time we'd be seeing each other. So I held her, just for a while, with a bath towel between us so our sweaty bodies wouldn't stick to each other. And when she calmed down, I dried her off again, got her nightgown on her, and put her to bed. She fell sound asleep right away. Or maybe she was just pretending to sleep. Whatever, she looked so sweet and lovely that night. She had the face of a girl of 13 or 14 who's never had a bit of harm done to her since the day she was born. I saw that look on her face, and I knew I could let myself fall asleep with an easy heart. When I woke at 6 in the morning, she was gone. Her nightgown was there where she had dropped it, but her clothes and sneakers and the flashlight I always kept by my pillow were missing. I knew immediately that something was wrong. I mean, the very fact that she had taken the flashlight meant she had left in the dark. I checked her desk just in case, and there was the note. "Please give all my clothes to Reiko." I woke everybody up right away, and we took different areas to look for her. We searched every inch of the place, from the insides of the dorms to the surrounding woods. It took us 5 hours to find her. She had even brought her own piece of rope and patted the cat. "Want some tea?" I asked. "Yes, thanks," said Reiko. I boiled water and brought a pot of tea back to the veranda. Sundown was approaching. The daylight had grown weak, and long shadows of trees stretched to our feet. I sipped my tea and looked at the strangely random garden with its funny mix of yellow globe flowers and pink azaleas and tall green nandins. So then the ambulance came and took Naoko away, and the police started questioning me. Not that there was much to question. There was a kind of suicide note, and it had obviously been a suicide. And they took it for granted that suicide was just one of those things that mental patients did. So it was pretty pro forma. As soon as they left, I telegraphed you. "What a sad little funeral it was," I said. Her family was obviously kind of bothered that I knew Naoko had died. I'm sure they didn't want people to know it was suicide. I probably shouldn't even have been there. Which made me feel even worse. As soon as I got back, I hit the road. "Hey, Watanabe, what do you say we take a walk? We can shop for something to make for dinner, maybe. I'm starved." "Sure. Is there something you want to eat?" "Sukiyaki," she said. "I haven't had anything like that for years. I used to dream about sukiyaki. Just stuffing myself with beef and green onions and noodles and roasted tofu and greens." "Sure, we can have that. But I don't have a sukiyaki pan." "Just leave it to me. I'll borrow one from your landlord." She ran off to the main house and came back with a good-sized pan and gas cooker and rubber hose. Not bad, huh? Not bad. We bought all the ingredients at the little shops in the neighborhood. Beef, eggs, vegetables, tofu. I picked out a fairly decent white wine. I tried to pay, but Reiko insisted on paying for everything. "Think how the family would laugh at me if they heard I let my nephew pay for the food," Reiko said. "Besides, I'm carrying a fair amount of cash, so don't worry. I wasn't about to leave the sanatorium broke." Reiko washed the rice and put it on to boil while I set up for cooking on the veranda.
When everything was ready to go, Reiko took out her guitar and seemed to be testing it with a slow Bach fugue. On the hard parts, she would purposely slow down or speed up or make it detached or sentimental, listening with obvious pleasure to the variety of sounds she could draw from the instrument. When she played the guitar, Reiko looked like a 17-year-old girl enjoying the sight of a new dress. Her eyes sparkled, and she pursed her lips with the hint of a smile. When she had finished the piece, she leaned back against a pillar and looked up at the sky as if deep in thought. I asked. "Not at all," she said. "I was just thinking about how hungry I am." "Aren't you planning to see your husband or your daughter while you're here? They must be in Tokyo somewhere." "Close enough. Yokohama. But no, I don't plan to see them. I'm sure I told you before, it's better for them if they don't have anything to do with me. They've started a new life of their own, and I'd just feel terrible if I did see them. No, the best thing is to keep away." She crumpled up her empty box of 7 stars and got a new box of cigarettes from her suitcase. She cut the seal and put one in her mouth, but she didn't light up. "I'm all through as a human being," she said. "All you're looking at is the lingering memory of what I used to be. The most important part of me, what used to be inside, died years ago. And I'm just functioning by rote memory." "But I like you now, Reiko. The way you are, lingering memory or whatever. What I have to say about it may not make any difference, but I'm really glad that you're wearing Naoko's clothes." Reiko smiled and lit her cigarette with a lighter. "For such a young guy, you really know how to make a woman happy." I felt myself reddening. "I'm just saying what I really think." "Sure, I know," said Reiko, smiling. When the rice was done soon after that, I greased the pan and arranged the ingredients for sukiyaki. "Tell me this isn't a dream," said Reiko, sniffing the air. "No, this is 100% realistic sukiyaki," I said. "Empirically speaking, of course." Instead of talking, we attacked the sukiyaki with our chopsticks, downed lots of beer, and finished up with the rice. Seagull came round, attracted by the smell, so we shared our meat with her. When we had eaten our fill, we sat leaning against the porch pillars and looking at the moon. "Satisfied?" I asked. "Totally," she groaned. "I've never eaten so much in my life." "What do you want to do now?" "Have a smoke and go to a public bath. My hair's a mess. I need to wash it." "No problem. There's one down the street." "Tell me, Watanabe, if you don't mind. Have you slept with that girl, Midori?" "You mean, have we had sex?" "Not yet. We decided not to until things get straightened out." "Well, now they're straightened out, wouldn't you say?" I shook my head. "No, not that. Now that Naoko's dead, you made your decision long before Naoko died. That you could never leave Midori. Whether Naoko is alive or dead, it has nothing to do with your decision. You chose Midori. Naoko chose to die. You're all grown up now, so you have to take responsibility for your choices. Otherwise, you ruin everything." "But I can't forget her," I said. "I told Naoko I would go on waiting for her, but I couldn't do it. I turned my back on her in the end. I'm not saying anyone's to blame. It's a problem for me myself. I do think that things would have worked out the same way even if I hadn't turned my back on her. Naoko was choosing death all along. But that's beside the point. I can't forgive myself. You tell me there's nothing I can do about a natural change in feelings, but my relationship with Naoko was not that simple. If you stop and think about it, she and I were bound together at the border between life and death. It was like that for us from the start. If you feel some kind of pain with regard to Naoko's death, I would advise you to keep on feeling that pain for the rest of your life.
And if there's something you can learn from it, you should do that too. But quite aside from that, you should be happy with Midori. Your pain has nothing to do with your relationship with her. If you hurt her any more than you already have, the wound could be too deep to fix. So, hard as it may be, you have to be strong. You have to grow up more. Be more of an adult. I left the sanatorium and came all the way up here to Tokyo to tell you that. All the way on that coffin of a train.
I understand what you're telling me, I said to Reiko. But I'm still not prepared to follow through on it. I mean, that was such a sad little funeral. No one should have to die like that. Reiko stretched her hand out and stroked my head. We all have to die like that sometime. I will, and so will you. We took the 5-minute walk along the riverbank to the local public bath and came home feeling somewhat refreshed. I opened the bottle of wine and we sat on the veranda drinking it. Say, Watanabe, could you bring out another glass? Sure, I said. But what for? We're going to have our own funeral for Naoko. Just the two of us. One that's not so sad. When I handed her the glass, Reiko filled it to the brim and set it on the stone lantern in the garden. Then she sat on the veranda, leaning against a pillar, guitar in her arms, and smoked a cigarette. And now, could you bring out a box of matches? Make it the biggest one you can find. I brought out an economy-sized box of kitchen matches and sat down next to her. Now what I want you to do is lay down a match every time I play a song. Just set them in a row. I'm going to play every song I can think of. First she played a soft, lovely rendition of Henry Mancini's Dear Heart. You gave a recording of this to Naoko, didn't you? Reiko asked. I did. For Christmas the year before last. She really liked that song. I like it too, said Reiko. So soft and beautiful. She ran through a few bars of the melody one more time before taking another sip of wine. I wonder how many songs I can play before I get completely drunk. This'll be a nice funeral, don't you think? Not so sad. Reiko moved on to the Beatles, playing Norwegian Wood, Yesterday, Michelle, and Something. She sang and played Here Comes the Sun, then played The Fool on the Hill. I laid 7 matches in a row. 7 songs, said Reiko, sipping more wine and smoking another cigarette. Those guys sure knew something about the sadness of life. And gentleness. By those guys, Reiko of course meant John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison. After a short breather, Reiko crushed her cigarette out and picked her guitar up again. She played Penny Lane, Blackbird, Julia, When I'm 64, Nowhere Man, And I Love Her, and Hey Jude. How many songs is that? 14, I said. She sighed and asked me, How about you? Can you play something? Maybe one song? No way, I'm terrible. So play it terribly. I brought out my guitar and stumbled my way through Up on the Roof. Reiko took a rest, smoking and drinking. When I was through, she applauded. Next, she played a guitar transcription of Ravel's Pavane for a Dying Queen, and a beautifully clean rendition of Debussy's Clair de Lune. I mastered both of these after Naoko died, said Reiko. To the end, her taste in music never rose above the horizon of sentimentalism. She performed a few Bacharach songs next. Close to You, Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head, Walk On By, plus Laura Nyro's Wedding Bell Blues. 20, I said. I'm like a human jukebox, Reiko exclaimed. My professors would faint if they could see me now. She went on sipping and puffing and playing. Several bossa novas, Rodgers and Hart, Gershwin, Bob Dylan, Ray Charles, Carole King, the Beach Boys, Stevie Wonder, Q Sakamoto's Sukiyaki Song, Blue Velvet, Green Fields. Sometimes she would close her eyes and nod or hum to the melody. We turned to whiskey. The wine in the glass in the garden I poured over the stone lantern and replaced it with whiskey.
How's our count going?
Reiko asked. 48, I said. For our 49th song, Reiko played Eleanor Rigby, and the 50th was another performance of Norwegian Wood. After that, she rested her hands and drank some whiskey.
Maybe that's enough, she said.
It is, I answered. Amazing. Reiko looked me in the eye and said,
Now listen to me, Watanabe. I want you to forget all about that sad little funeral you saw. Just remember this marvelous one of ours.
I nodded.
Here's one more for good measure, she said,
and for her 51st piece, she played her favorite Bach fugue. When she was through, she said in a voice just above a whisper,
How about doing it with me, Watanabe?
Strange, I said. I was thinking the same thing. We went inside and closed the curtains. Then, in the darkened room, Reiko and I sought out each other's bodies as if it were the most natural thing in the world for us to do. I removed her blouse and slacks, and then her underwear.
I've lived a strange life, said Reiko, but I never thought I'd have my panties removed for me by a man 19 years my junior.
Would you rather take them off yourself?
No, go ahead. But don't be too shocked at all my wrinkles.
I like your wrinkles.
You're going to make me cry, she whispered.
I kissed her all over, taking special care to follow the wrinkled places with my tongue. She had the breasts of a little girl. I caressed them and took her nipples in my teeth, then slid a finger inside her warm, moist vagina and began to move it.
Wrong spot, Watanabe,
Reiko whispered in my ear.
That's just a wrinkle.
I can't believe you're telling jokes at a time like this.
Sorry, she said. I'm scared. I haven't done this for years. I feel like a 17-year-old girl. I just went to visit a guy in his room and all of a sudden, I'm naked.
To tell you the truth, I feel as if I'm violating a 17-year-old girl. With my finger in her wrinkle, I moved my lips up her neck to her ear and took a nipple with the fingers of my other hand, and her throat began to tremble. I parted her long, slim legs and eased myself inside her.
You're not going to get me pregnant now, are you? You're taking care of that, right?
Reiko murmured in my ear.
I'd be so embarrassed if I got pregnant at this age.
Don't worry, I said. Just relax. When I was all the way in, she trembled and released a sigh. Caressing her back, I moved inside her, and then without warning, I came. It was an intense, unstoppable ejaculation. I clutched at her as my semen pulsed into her warmth again and again. I'm sorry, I said. I couldn't stop myself.
Don't be silly,
Reiko said, giving me a little slap on the rump.
You don't have to worry about that. Do you always have that on your mind when you're doing it with girls?
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, you don't have to think about it with me. Forget it. Just let yourself go as much as you like. Did it feel good?
Just great. That's why I couldn't control myself.
This is no time for controlling yourself. This is fine. It was great for me, too.
You know, Reiko, I said.
What's that?
You ought to take a lover again. You're terrific. It's such a waste.
Well, I'll think about it, she said. But I wonder if people take lovers and things in Asahikawa.
Growing hard a few minutes later, I went inside her again. Reiko held her breath and twisted beneath me. I moved slowly and quietly with my arms around her, and we talked. It felt wonderful to talk that way. If I said something funny and made her laugh, the tremors came into me through my penis. We held each other like that for a very long time.
"Oh, this is marvelous,"
Reiko said. "Moving's not bad either," I said.
"Go ahead, give it a try."
I lifted her hips and went in as far as I could go, then savored the sensation of moving in a circular pattern until, having enjoyed it to the full, I let myself come. Altogether, we joined our bodies 4 times that night. At the end each time, Reiko would lie in my arms trembling slightly, eyes closed, and release a long sigh.
"I never have to do this again," said Reiko, "for the rest of my life. Oh, please, Watanabe, tell me it's true. Tell me I can relax now, because I've done enough to last a lifetime."
"Nobody can tell you that," I said. "There's no way to know." I tried to convince Reiko that taking a plane would be faster and easier, but she insisted on going to Asahikawa by train.
"I like the ferry to Hokkaido, and I have no desire to fly through the air," she said.
I accompanied her to Ueno Station. She carried her guitar and I carried her suitcase. We sat on a platform bench waiting for the train to pull in. Reiko wore the same tweed jacket and white pants she'd had on when she arrived in Tokyo.
"Do you really think Asahikawa's not such a bad place?"
she asked. "It's a nice town. I'll visit you there soon."
"Really?"
I nodded. "And I'll write to you."
"I love your letters. Naoko burned all the ones you sent her, and they were such great letters, too."
"Letters are just pieces of paper," I said. "Burn them, and what stays in your heart will stay. Keep them, and what vanishes will vanish."
"You know, Watanabe, truth is I'm scared going to Asahikawa by myself. So be sure to write to me. Whenever I read your letters, I feel you're right there next to me."
"If that's what you want, I'll write all the time. But don't worry. I know you. You'll do fine wherever you go."
"And another thing. I kind of feel like there's something stuck inside me. Could it be my imagination?"
"Just a lingering memory," I said, and smiled. Reiko smiled too.
"Don't forget about me,"
she said. "I won't forget you," I said. "Ever."
"We may never meet again, but no matter where I go, I'll always remember you and Naoko."
I saw that she was crying. Before I knew it, I was kissing her. Others on the platform were staring at us, but I didn't care about such things anymore. We were alive, she and I, and all we had to think about was continuing to live.
"Be happy,"
Reiko said to me as she boarded the train.
"I've given you all the advice I have to give. There's nothing left for me to say. Just be happy. Take my share and Naoko's and combine them for yourself."
We held hands for a moment, and then we parted. I telephoned Midori. "I have to talk to you," I said. "I have a million things to talk to you about. A million things we have to talk about. All I want in this world is you. I want to see you and talk. I want the two of us to begin everything from the beginning." Midori responded with a long, long silence. The silence of all the misty rain in the world falling on all the new mown lawns of the world. forehead pressed against the glass, I shut my eyes and waited. At last, Midori's quiet voice broke the silence. "Where are you now?" Where was I now? Gripping the receiver, I raised my head and turned to see what lay beyond the telephone booth. Where was I now? I had no idea. No idea at all. Where was this place? All that flashed into my eyes were the countless shapes of people walking by to nowhere. Again and again, I called out for Midori from the dead center of this place that was no place.
The end. You've been listening to Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami, translated from the Japanese by J. Rubin. This book was narrated by James Yagashi and directed by T.G. Reynolds. Originally published in Japan as Norue no Mori, the English version of Murakami's modern classic is accompanied with the following afterword by translator J. Rubin. Haruki Murakami was shocked and depressed to find his normal six-figure readership exploding into the millions when he published Norwegian Wood in 1987. Fame was one thing, superstardom another, and the craziness of it sent him back to the anonymity of Europe. He had written the book in Greece and Italy. In 1991, he moved to the United States. Not until 1995 was he prepared to resume living in Japan, but strictly on his own terms, without the television appearances and professional pontification expected of a best-selling Japanese author. Norwegian Wood is still the one Murakami book that everyone in Japan has read, but Murakami's young audience has grown up with him as he has begun wrestling with Japan's dark past in The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle, and the 1995 double punch of the Kobe earthquake and, in Underground, the sarin gas attack on the Tokyo subway. Accustomed to his cool, fragmented American-flavored narratives on mysterious sheep and disappearing elephants, some of Murakami's early readers were dismayed to find that Norwegian Wood seemed to be just a love story, and one that bore a suspicious resemblance to the kind of Japanese mainstream autobiographical fiction that Murakami had flat-out rejected since his exciting debut in 1979. As Murakami himself tells it, "Many of my readers thought that Norwegian Wood was a retreat for me, a betrayal of what my works had stood for until then. For me personally, however, it was just the opposite. It was an adventure, a challenge. I had never written that kind of straight, simple story, and I wanted to test myself. I set Norwegian Wood in the late 1960s. I borrowed the details of the protagonist's college environment and daily life from those of my own college days. As a result, many people think it's an autobiographical novel, but in fact, it is not autobiographical at all. My own youth was far less dramatic, far more boring than his. If I had simply written the literal truth of my own life, the novel would have been no more than 15 pages long. The author may joke away its autobiographicality, but the book feels like an autobiography. It favors lived experience over mind games and shots at the supernatural. And it does indeed tell us much more straightforwardly than any of his other novels what life was like for the young Haruki Murakami when he first came to Tokyo from Kobe. Back then, in the years 1968 to 1970 that occupy the bulk of the novel, Murakami's experience centered on meeting the love of his life, his wife, Yoko, amid the turbulence of the student movement. The author is right, though. There is a lot of fiction here, and a lot of caricature and humor, and a lot of symbolism that Murakami's regular readers will recognize instantly. It is by no means just a love story. That was translator J. Rubin on the background surrounding the writing and publication of Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami. If you've enjoyed this book and this performance, Recorded Books recommends other modern classics, such as Night by Elie Wiesel, translated from the French by Marion Wiesel, and narrated by George Guidel. This extraordinary new translation of Elie Wiesel's great testimony to the murdered millions of Europe is a terrifying account of the Nazi death camp horror that turns a young Jewish boy into an agonized witness to the death of his family, the death of his innocence, and the death of his God. Penetrating and powerful, as personal as the diary of Anne Frank, Night awakens the shocking memory of evil at its absolute and carries with it the unforgettable message that this horror must never be allowed to happen again. We also recommend To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf, narrated by Virginia Leishman. The novel that established Virginia Woolf as a leading writer of the 20th century, To the Lighthouse is made up of 3 powerfully charged visions into the life of one family living in a summer house off the rocky coast of Scotland. As time winds its way through their lives, the Ramsays face, alone and simultaneously, the greatest of human challenges and its greatest triumph, the human capacity for change. You'll find a wide selection of titles in the Recorded Books catalog, including bestsellers, mysteries, classics, histories, and more. So, to order another recorded book, or for a copy of our latest listing, please call the toll-free number found on the back of this book. Don't forget to ask about easy 30-day rentals by mail. On our website, you can browse our catalog, place orders, hear about our latest releases, or tune in to narrator profiles and author interviews. So visit us there at www.recordedbooks.com. And thank you for being a Recorded Books reader. 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 Recorded Books reader.